Sorry, Phil, I thought I heard someone say something.
We're getting quite a few hits on the REM pod, aren't we?
Who was the lady that spoke to us last time?
Oh, and the laser grid's just gone off.
Huh?
The laser grid's just come on, and I was dead still.
Someone's walking.
There's movement back from over where that table is, Jeff. Until after the war, when they decided that they were going to go back to what they knew best, and that was shop fitting.
The lady that wanders here, that leaves the smell of a fragrance, a perfume. What was that, Phil?
What was your role? What did you do? How did you help?
Help.
What was that, Jeff?
Yes, sir, yes. Even poison. Manufactured record. Yes, sir. Go. Yes, sir, yes, sir. Yes, sir, yes, sir. Here we go. Yes, sir, yes, sir. Here we go. It's like a light is in my face, but I can't fall for you. I close my eyes and drift away. I've overdosed on you. Cause then you wake up dead one day.
On our last investigation here, we experienced several events of paranormal activity, and the evidence captured suggested that there was a spirit of a woman who was connected with the Second World War. This was something that was unexpected due to the history. But after we presented the evidence to Steve and Claire, who are the managers of the location, everything then started to fall into place. We were then told by Steve that only yards away was a factory that used to repair gun turrets throughout World War II. Armed with this new information, we arrange our return to the Wheelhouse. The Wheelhouse dates back to 1885, and in 1904, Arthur Liberty purchased the building for his fabric business, which were to become world famous due to their designs. William Morris, the great Victorian designer, was a neighbour to Arthur Liberty, and they both became leaders in the arts and crafts movement. Arthur Liberty was knighted in 1913 and died 4 years later in 1917. Steve and Claire have had their pottery business here for over 30 years, and they have had paranormal experiences such as small piles of rock appearing from nowhere, sudden falls in temperature, and the smell of a woman's perfume. On our first investigation at the Wheelhouse, we encountered the paranormal activity for ourselves. This location, it was built in 1885, and it's the only working mill in the whole of London.
Arthur, if I may call you that. Mr. Liberty, sir.
What sort of building was it that was here before the mill?
And they only identified his body because of DNA. There wasn't much left of him. Whoa! Movement behind me.
Well, hopefully we've caught something. What was that?
Who's moving?
What's that noise? Over there by the door.
Something's moving behind us. My whole body's just gone frozen. All through my legs and my back. Something's around me.
Where was that from?
Do you know that song? At the outbreak of World War II in 1939, Arthur Liberty's print works at the Wheelhouse continued as usual. The luxury goods were still successful, but all was to change in 1940 with the Blitz. The factories and railway lines made this area a frequent target for bombing. During this time, Arthur Liberty leased his land to a firm directly involved in the war effort, Parnell Aircraft Limited. Originally builders of light aircraft, Parnells were now specialising in the virtual manufacture and repair of gun turrets for the Blenheim Bristol bomber. They moved here in 1941 when their original factory was bombed in Bristol. The factory was just yards away from the Wheelhouse and had hundreds of workers. We now catch up again with Steve, the manager of the Wheelhouse, for more information. So here we are again back at the Wheelhouse, and we've got Steve with us again, the manager, along with Claire, of this old mill. So, Steve, after our last investigation here, we sent you the evidence, which you saw. We did capture footsteps. We did capture movement, especially it sounded like someone flicking a piece of your pottery, which was a strange noise, along with other types of noises. But two of the EVPs we captured sounded like an elderly woman. One of the EVPs was the war, and the second EVP, which we caught towards the end of the investigation, was the same voice saying, "Do you remember the war? Or do you remember anything about the war?" Yeah. And it was only after the investigation, when we spoke, then you mentioned about a factory that used to be here.
That's right. I mean, during the Second World War, Parnells, who were in Bristol, their factory was bombed, and they relocated to Merton Abbey Mills, and they used this site to build machine gun turrets for Bristol Blenheim bombers. And certainly because we're on the line of a railway line here, there was a lot of bombs dropped on this site, and certainly lots of people would have lost their lives.
Yeah. So this factory was only, well, not far from it, was just along there.
I mean, certainly they made them in the long shop, which is literally, well, about 10 yards from here. Things would have been stored in the Wheelhouse, certainly, so there would have been workers in here during the war. There was parachute manufacturers nearby. There were floats for seaplanes being made nearby. Gliders were made out of, basically it was balsa wood, string and canvas, and they just glued them together and varnished them. And certainly there were varnish manufacturers. So there was a lot of industry here, which obviously made this area a target. If you look at some of the maps of the amount of bombs that dropped on this area, it is phenomenal.
Yeah. So this factory was yards away,
Yeah.
repairing turrets. I mean, and we got those. We didn't click it first of all until after the investigation, and the same with yourself. Once you saw the evidence, you then said, "Well, hold on. There used to be a factory here,
Yeah.
repairing turrets for Blenheim bombers," and it all started to.
The Triang toy factory, the Lion factory, which is literally about 100 yards in that direction, they made machine guns there during the war. So lots going on.
Yeah. Well, hopefully tonight we can make that connection again and see if this lady wants to come forward and speak to us again.
Well, I'll be interested to see what you find.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Steve, thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We have 3 static cams in place covering the area, and it was now time for lights out. So here we are again, back at the Wheelhouse. And just for those of you that don't know, there is a constant source of running water, which is just behind me here. It's not too loud. We found that when we was here before, it was okay. We could still pick up EVPs. One other fact that Steve mentioned to us was that it's constantly cold inside here, even in the summer. They have to wear jumpers. And as I said, just recently they took a temperature of the water outside and the temperature in here. And outside was warmer. So that's a little bit strange. It's baffled a lot of people why it's so cold in here. So last time when we was here, there were footsteps behind us, just over here somewhere. And we did pick up movement of pottery and also 2 EVPs, both of the same lady, and she sounded like an elderly lady. One EVP was the war, and the second EVP is, do you know anything about the war? So we definitely got those voices, and people do say they can smell a fragrance, a perfume. So we're sort of saying, well, that must belong to this lady. This is where this perfume is coming from. She's here. And as we said in the interview with Steve, there was a factory here that done turrets for the Blenheim bombers. And there was other small industries all around it that dealt with the war. So maybe she used to work here in one of the factories. But first of all, I'm going to try and make contact with Arthur Liberty, who had his business here in the 1800s, and also not far away there was another designer called William Morris. So this is how all this started. Printing of fabrics, using the wheel, using the water. Sorry, Phil, I thought I heard someone say something. So first of all, can I ask if Arthur Liberty is here? Arthur, are you here? If you are, can you make some sort of noise so we can hear it, please? Who was the lady that spoke to us last time? The lady that wanders here, that leaves the smell of a fragrance, a perfume. What was that, Phil? I heard knocking. Did you hear knocking?
I don't know.
It was as soon as I mentioned the lady. As I am talking about the spirit of a lady that wanders the wheelhouse, I hear knocking come from nearby. Here is the audio enhanced. The lady that wanders here, that leaves the smell of a fragrance, a perfume. What was that, Phil? I heard knocking. Did you hear knocking?
I don't know.
It was as soon as I mentioned the lady.
After we were last here, Steve told us that literally about 10 feet away there was a factory which made and repaired gun turrets for the planes such as the Bristol bomber. Now, it's interesting because when we did our first investigation, we didn't know this, and yet 2 of the EVPs we received were relating to the war. Now, I did, excuse me, I did a little bit of digging on the company that was based here, that was producing the gun turrets. And it's quite an interesting history. Originally, there was a company called Parnell and Sons, and they were shop fitters from the late Victorian times. But during the First World War, they got involved with producing planes. And this went on for a fair amount of time until after the war, when they decided that they were going to go back to what they knew best, and that was shop fitting. Now, one of the directors was a chap called George Parnell.
Hold on, Phil.
Yes?
I heard a voice. Something to do with Yankees. I heard it as clear as anything, and I was looking at you. I thought it was you, and it wasn't you. As Phil is speaking about the World War II company Parnell Limited, I clearly hear a voice that mentions the word Yankees. I then realise that it is not Phil, and on the replay of our audio there is indeed a man's voice who is saying, "The Yankees are here."
Until after the war, when they decided that they were going to go back to what they knew best, and that was shop fitting. Now, one of the directors was a chap called George Parnell.
Hold on, Phil.
Until after the war, when they decided that they were going to go back to what they knew best, and that was shop fitting. Now, one of the directors was a chap called George Parnell.
Hold on, Phil.
As I was saying, the company Parnell and Sons, they returned to their shop fitting business, and one of the directors, George Parnell, he decided to continue with the planes, and he set up a company, George Parnell and Co., and it was very successful. It was based initially in Bristol. I believe they took over an old ice rink of all things, but eventually they outgrew that and they moved to Yate. Now, in 1941, the factory in Yate was actually bombed twice, fairly closely together, and a total of 55 people were killed. They needed to obviously continue producing planes, but more importantly in this area, gun turrets, and they actually moved on to this site. And yes, gun turrets were made literally a few feet away from where I'm sat now. Just had a flash on the REM pod. If you are to do with the factory, which was next door, as Jeff has already said, come and join us. We're getting quite a few hits on the REM pod, aren't we?
Yeah, temperature's changing constantly.
If I hold out my hand, could you stand where my hand is, please, so I can feel?
Look at that REM pod.
Well, it doesn't normally do that, does it?
Temperature's dropping.
It is dropping quickly as well, isn't it?
I can feel it. Can you feel it?
Yeah, I can.
I'm getting really cold at the moment, and that is confirming that.
Are you with us now? Could you make yourself known by moving something that is close to us? It's cold now, isn't it?
Freezing.
Well, last time we were here, this particular area we're sat in now, we heard quite a few noises. We heard the china being moved or knocked against. Could you do that again, perhaps on... What's that?
It's the REM pod going into alarm. The temperature's gone into alarm.
Oh, I heard a chink of something as well.
Yeah, I did. Somewhere behind you on the pottery again, Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Could you do that again for me, please?
The REM pod goes into alarm as it detects a sudden drop in temperature. And as Phil and I start to feel the coldness surround us, there is a sound of a piece of pottery being hit. The temperature's gone into alarm.
Oh, I heard a chink of something as well.
Yeah, I did. Somewhere behind you on the pottery again, Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Could you do that again for me, please? Are you the lady that spoke to us last time we were here? Gone into alarm again. Do you want me to talk to you about the war, as you asked? If you do, could you knock maybe the pottery again or bang on the table?
Someone's walking.
I heard something then.
Just heard footsteps. From the other side of the wheelhouse, we both hear footsteps walk by. Here is the audio with enhancements. Someone's walking.
I heard something then.
Someone's walking.
I heard something then.
Just heard footsteps. We set up a laser grid along with a cam in a different area of the wheelhouse. The laser grid is motion triggered and will activate if anything moves within 3 feet in front of the sensor that will be facing Phil.
Okay, I'm going to start this session. Firstly, I'm going to prove a point. We have a laser grid pointing directly towards me, which is on a motion sensor. Now, there we go. I'm moving around, and it won't detect me. You have to be right in front of it for it to go off. So if the laser grid goes off, it's because something has moved in front of it and it isn't me. There's movement back from over where that table is, Jeff.
Hold on a sec, Phil.
Oh, and the laser grid's just gone off.
Huh?
The laser grid's just come on and I was dead still.
movement is heard coming from the area that we were just previously located, and then the laser grid activates as it detects movement in front of Phil.
There's movement back from over where that table is, Jeff. There's movement back from over where that table is, Jeff. Now, my dad grew up very locally. He was a child in the Second World War. And I remember, well, he still talks about it. There was a lot of bombing in this area. And he was actually bombed out twice. On the second time, a bomb hit a house next door and it destroyed 7 houses in the direction away from where he was living. Now, he was lucky. The house he was in, yes, there was a lot of damage. The roof came down. He was buried under rubble. His sister was buried under a door frame that came down. But they survived, whereas the occupants of the houses that went away the other direction. I heard you then.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Pottery moving again.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was it illustrates that Mitcham, Collier's Wood, all that area was very, very heavily bombed. Did you experience the bombing?
The sound of pottery being moved or hit is heard again, and then Phil's digital recorder captures an EVP of a man saying, "Hello, here is the audio enhanced."
But they survived, whereas the occupants of the houses that went away the other direction. I heard you then.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Pottery moving again.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was it illustrates that Mitcham, Collier's Wood, but they survived, whereas the occupants of the houses that went away the other direction. I heard you then.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Pottery moving again.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was it illustrates that Mitcham, Collier's Wood, my nan, she drove ambulances all the way around here, across Mitcham Common. She was one of the women who had to do what was traditionally a man's job, I suppose. And I remember her telling me that the final test before she could actually do it was she had to drive around with a matchbox stood upright on the dashboard, and it wasn't allowed to fall over. Now, the lady who has spoken to us, yeah, I'm assuming you were around then because you did ask about the war. What was your role? What did you do? How did you help?
Help.
What was that, Jeff?
Jesus. Hold on a sec, Phil. That come from?
What was it?
A woman's voice? A woman's voice, something to do with factory outside. That's part of what I heard. It made me jump. Something to do with a factory outside. That's all I know.
Okay. Well, that's good. So you were here and you were in the factory outside. Now, there were several factories. There was obviously the company that produced the gun turrets. Did you work for them? Make a noise now, or tell us if you worked for them.
Yeah.
A disembodied voice of a lady responds to Phil. It is the clearest disembodied voice that we have captured to date. The voice is saying a factory somewhere just outside, which comes from behind me and startles me. And it is the same voice of a woman that we have received before on our previous investigation. And then Phil asks if she worked for the company that repaired the gun turrets, and the same voice responds by saying yes. Here is the enhanced audio.
What was your role? What did you do? How did you help?
A factory somewhere just outside.
Help.
What was that, Jeff?
Jesus. Hold on a sec, Phil.
What was your role? What did you do? How did you help?
A factory somewhere just outside.
Help.
What was that, Jeff?
Jesus. Hold on a sec, Phil.
Did you work for them? Make a noise now, or tell us if you worked for them.
Yeah.
Did you work for them? Make a noise now, or tell us if you worked for them.
Yeah.
So, we're near on coming up to the end of the investigation, and there is a hit again on pottery. And I was going to say, if there's something that you can do, if you could do it for us. You can hear the birds waking up in the background as dawn's now approaching. If you really do want to get our attention, push a piece of pottery off the shelf so it falls on the floor and breaks. Then we can definitely hear that. And then we know that you've been listening. Can you do that, please? I ask if whoever is with us to push a piece of pottery on the floor so it breaks, and my digital recorder receives an EVP of a man's voice saying, "Disrespect." Here is the enhanced audio taken from my digital recorder. Push a piece of pottery off the shelf so it falls on the floor and breaks. Then we can definitely hear that. And then we know that you've been listening. Push a piece of pottery off the shelf so it falls on the floor and breaks. Then we can definitely hear that. And then we know that you've been listening. we fire up the SLS cam that will map in any figures that our eyes cannot see. But after a full sweep of the wheelhouse, no figures were detected. Before the investigation commenced at the wheelhouse, we had set up a static cam to run for 6 hours, and during the production of this episode, when the camera was reviewed, we had captured a shadow figure moving from right to left. No one had access to the building as we had the keys, and every window was sealed so no light would contaminate any evidence. Here is the original footage of the figure, followed by the footage with enhancements.